Listening Library presents Captain Marvel, adapted by Steve Behling, read for you by Emily O'Brien.
Prologue. The sky was on fire. At least, that was how it looked. Flaming debris rained down upon the riverbed as thick, black smoke filled the air. Where was this? When was this? She didn't know. The source of the smoke and debris was a fiery hunk of metal that was now half embedded in the ground. She blinked slowly, taking in the view. An aircraft, wrecked, twisted, useless. Something running down her face. Blood? She wiped her hand beneath her nose, then stared at her fingers. Blood. Blue blood. Sitting up, she saw another person. Was it the pilot? A passenger? She thought it might be a woman. Yes, definitely a woman. Although her features were fuzzy, distorted, almost as though she was seeing her through one of those funhouse mirrors. The woman held a weapon, a pistol, in her hand, and raised it. Then she lowered the gun. More smoke. So hard to see. But something was approaching the wreckage. Or someone. She strained to see who it was, coming toward her, and the fuzzy woman with the pistol. The pace was deliberate, almost plodding, rhythmic, advancing through the smoke, closer and closer. And then she saw the blaster. Chapter 1. Veers's eyes opened sharply, and she felt like she had been awake for hours. She never seemed to sleep very soundly, as if she were always on the edge of awareness, ready for anything. It was morning, she could tell. Sitting up, Veers swung her legs over the side of the bed. Like her sleeping quarters, the bed itself was Spartan, made not for comfort, but for functionality. She took a deep, long breath, held it for a moment, then released the air from her lungs. She'd had the dream again. The same dream she'd had seemingly every night, ever since she could remember. As Veers collected herself, she became aware of the slight hum of the metal disc that had been implanted in her neck, a photon battery. She balled up a hand, making a fist, and squeezed. Almost immediately, the fist began to glow, as photon energy swirled around it. Then she relaxed the hand, letting it open, and just as quickly, the energy dispersed into thin air. She couldn't remember anything before the photon battery had been implanted. Truth be told, she couldn't remember that either. They had told her about that after the fact. The shade covering the window slowly rose by itself, revealing dawn already in progress. From her quarters in the Kree military tower, Veers could see a world, her world, starting its day. Vehicles soared through the air, occupying the space above the busy streets below, streaking in between the tall, thin buildings that dotted the landscape. This was Hala, the capital city of the Kree home world, and the seat of all Kree civilization. Veers sighed once more and rose up off the bed to take on the day. "Do you know what time it is?" Veers stood in the doorway and gave a slight shrug of her shoulders. "Can't sleep," she said. Yanrog, the Kree Star Force commander, looked at Veers searchingly, his features a mask of familiar exasperation with just the slightest hint of concern. "There are tabs for that," he finally said. Veers smiled ever so slightly, as Yanrog stared at her, still groggy. "Yeah, but then I'd be sleeping," she said. Two things were now immediately clear to Yanrog. One, Veers wasn't going anywhere. Two, he could just forget about going back to sleep. "Dreams again?" Yanrog said, understanding in his voice. Veers nodded. Then, not missing a beat, she said. "Wanna fight?" Yanrog didn't, not really. What he wanted was his remaining hour of sleep before a long, demanding day of responsibilities took hold. He knew better. Blam! Veers felt herself lifted high into the air, her body slamming to the mat a second later. "I slipped," she said, rolling quickly from her side to her back. Standing above her, Yanrog stood with his feet planted, perpendicular to one another, his hands clenched into fists, ready for the sparring match to continue. "Right," he said, the sarcasm evident from his tone. "You slipped as a result of me punching you in the face." Before Yanrog could do anything, Veers was already back on her feet, assuming her fighter's stance. "I was already slipping when you happened to punch me in the face," Veers said with a smirk, correcting her commander. The two events were not related. The two warriors stood face to face, each looking at the other for any sign of weakness, any potential opening. These early morning training sessions in the subzone gym had become something of a ritual for Veers and Yanrog, especially since her insomnia seemed to have been growing worse as of late. "Tell me about this dream," Yanrog said, as Veers threw a punch. The Star Force commander expertly evaded her fist. This sparked the competitive spirit within Veers, who let loose a volley of blows, any one of which would have been devastating, had they connected, which they didn't. There were a few other Kree warriors in the gym at this hour, trying to sneak in a workout before the start of their busy days. They stopped what they were doing momentarily to watch Yanrog and Veers in action. In a blur, Yanrog grabbed Veers by her throat and grasped her by the wrist. "Anything new?" he said, still referring to her dream. Veers slipped out of Yanrog's grip, then threw another punch at her commander, who ducked the blow. "No," she answered, barely out of breath. Then she leaned over, raising her leg in the air, and spun around, kicking Yanrog, or rather, kicking the empty air where Yanrog had been less than a second ago. Right before Veers's foot would have connected, Yanrog crouched down low, and the leg zoomed right over his head. Then he rose, fists raised, fighting posture resumed, as Veers closed in on him once again. She could feel the fire burning inside, and she wanted to take her commander down and teach him a lesson. Veers unleashed another punch, missing Yanrog again. Before she could retract the arm, Yanrog grabbed it, then raised it upward. "You have to let go of the past," he said, grunting, struggling to hold her arm. "I don't remember my past," Veers shot back. "It's causing you doubt," Yanrog said, "and doubt makes you vulnerable." Yanrog took hold of Veers's arm, then swung her onto his shoulders. Then Veers flipped over Yanrog, landing right beside him. The Star Force commander still held Veers's arm, though. In control of the combat, Yanrog fell to his knees, pulling Veers over his shoulder once more, and launched her into the air until she landed on the mat a few feet from him. A ringing slap resounded as Veers's back hit the mat, nearly knocking the wind out of her. But Veers wouldn't let that stop her. She rose to her knees defensively as Yanrog grabbed her arm and began to twist. Then she felt something else, something building up from inside, and her fist began to glow. "Control it," Yanrog said, panting. The words somehow seemed to reach Veers, who looked at her glowing fist. Slowly, the glow subsided. She stood up, steadying herself, and Yanrog stood before her, grasping her hand. "Lose control again, and you'll have to commune with the Supreme Intelligence," he said. He let go and placed his hands on Veers's shoulders. "There's nothing more dangerous to a warrior than emotion," he added.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?